Be me, 38. I restore classic cars. Not the fancy TV show kind of place. Just a decent-sized garage I own, full of tools, smelling of oil and steel. It's my passion, and it pays the bills. Or at least, it used to pay all of them. Story starts about a year and a half ago, sitting in a courtroom that felt too cold for a summer day. The air was thick with that cheap lemon-scented cleaner they use in government buildings. Across the table, my soon-to-be ex-wife is giving the performance of a lifetime, tears streaming down her face, dabbing her eyes with a tissue just so. She's telling the judge about how our marriage stifled her. Not in a normal way, like we grew apart or had communication issues. Oh no, it was far more spiritual than that. She explains with a shaky voice that my grounded masculine energy was a blockage to her own divine feminine flow. Apparently my job, working with my hands on real, tangible things like engines and metal, was creating a toxic, materialistic aura in our home. It was preventing her from manifesting her true potential as an entrepreneur and a spiritual influencer. I'm just sitting there, watching my lawyer shuffle his papers. He's a decent guy, but he looks as confused as I feel. How do you even begin to argue against someone's aura? She tells the judge she provided years of emotional and energetic labor, that her daily meditation and positive affirmations were the silent, unseen engine that allowed my business to succeed. She actually said that with a straight face. The judge, a woman who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book, was actually nodding along. Maybe it was the tears, maybe it was the buzzwords. I'll never know. The final verdict comes down. It's a gut punch. She gets the house we were renting, which I couldn't care less about, but she also gets 60% of our combined savings, except they weren't our savings. They were my business savings. Money I had been painstakingly putting aside for years, dollar by dollar, job by job. It was for a specific project, my holy grail, a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. I had the shell lined up, knew a guy who knew a guy, just needed the cash to make it happen. In one afternoon, under the hum of fluorescent lights, that dream was gone, wiped out by an aura. I walked out of there feeling numb. Didn't even say anything to her. What was the point? Drove straight to my buddy's bar. It's a small, no-frills place. Good beer, no loud music. He saw my face when I walked in and just poured a glass of whiskey, slid it across the bar. I told him what happened, the energetic labor part. He just shook his head, a grim smile on his face. "She didn't just take your money, man," he said. "She took your Mustang." He was right. That's what hurt the most. It wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of years of hard work. I finished the drink, paid my tab, and went to my garage. That night, I made a decision. No more drama. No more focusing on what I lost. Just work. Head down, hands dirty. That's it. The first month after the divorce was finalized was a blur of activity. I moved my personal stuff into the small apartment above my garage. It was basic, but it was mine. Sold off some of the furniture from the old house that she didn't want. Every day was the same. Wake up, coffee, walk downstairs into the garage, work until I couldn't see straight, walk upstairs, sleep. Repeat. It was almost peaceful in its monotony. Meanwhile, my ex-wife was on a different path, a much more enlightened one. The first thing she did with her settlement was book a 2-week spiritual retreat in Bali. Of course she did. Suddenly, her social media was a non-stop slideshow of her finding herself. Pictures of her in flowing white dresses on a black sand beach. Photos of her meditating on a cliff at sunrise, a serene, practiced smile on her face. Long captions about shedding negative energy, embracing her power, and manifesting abundance. There were pictures with her guru, a guy with a man bun, way too many bracelets, and the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He was her guide on this journey of self-discovery, paid for with profits from rebuilt carburetors and custom paint jobs. The irony was thick enough to cut with a grinder. My buddy would sometimes show me her posts when I was at his bar. He found it hilarious. I just found it exhausting. It was like watching a stranger, someone I'd never even met. I'd just shrug, take a sip of my beer, and change the subject back to the '72 Chevelle I was rewiring. Real things. Problems I could actually solve with my hands and my brain. When she got back from Bali, full of newfound purpose, she decided to act on her entrepreneurial dreams. She rented a small, expensive storefront in the trendiest part of town. She was opening an eco-conscious, ethereal boutique. I only knew this because a mutual acquaintance mentioned it. Out of some morbid curiosity, I drove by one afternoon before it opened. The sign was made of reclaimed wood with the name of the shop burned into it in a swirly, unreadable font. The grand opening was a big event on her social media. Pictures of her surrounded by her new friends, all of them looking like they'd just stepped out of a yoga magazine. They were her tribe, her soul sisters. They all toasted with champagne, organic, probably, to her success. The shop itself was exactly what you'd expect. It sold things like hand-poured soy candles that smelled like forgiveness, small bottles of water that were supposedly charged by the full moon, and of course, crystals. So many crystals. Big ones, small ones, all promising to align your chakras, attract wealth, or protect you from negative energy. Each with a price tag that could make your eyes water. A piece of amethyst the size of my fist was listed for a few $100s. I could buy a whole new set of wrenches for that. My life continued its simple rhythm. I finished the Chevelle project. The owner was ecstatic, paid me a bonus. That went straight into the new Mustang fund. It was a tiny fraction of what I used to have, but it was a start. I took on a new project, a beat-up old pickup truck that a local farmer wanted to get running again. It was tough work. Rust everywhere. The engine was seized. But every bolt I managed to loosen, every part I cleaned and restored, felt like a victory. Fall rolled around. The weather got cooler. I started spending my evenings rebuilding an old engine just for practice, to keep my skills sharp. My buddy and I had our weekly routine. Friday nights, I'd close up shop, wash the grease off my hands, and head to his bar for a couple of beers. He'd update me on the local gossip. In a small town, news travels fast. The word was, my ex-wife's boutique wasn't doing so well. Apparently, the market for $500 rocks and magical water wasn't as big as she thought. People would come in, look around, take some pictures for their own social media, and then leave without buying anything. Her tribe of soul sisters were always there for the free champagne at parties, but they never seemed to actually purchase any of the products. She wasn't worried, though, or at least she didn't show it online. Her posts became even more focused on manifestation, trusting the universe. Scarcity is a mindset. My business is a reflection of my inner abundance. It was a masterclass in denial. She truly believed that if she just wished for success hard enough, customers would magically appear. Her guru, who was now back in the States, told her the store's failure was due to a misalignment of its commercial chai. The solution? A complete redesign. More expensive crystals, of course, and a cleansing ceremony that cost a significant amount of money for him to perform. I just kept my head down, finished the farmer's pickup truck. He was so happy he could have cried, paid me in cash, and gave me a crate of fresh vegetables from his garden. That felt more real than any amount of manifested abundance. My savings account was slowly, painfully, starting to grow again. It felt good. It felt earned. I started sourcing parts for the Mustang, found a guy in another state selling original chrome trim online, bought it, found a set of period-correct hubcaps at a swap meet, bought them. Each piece was a small promise to myself that I was getting back on track. Winter came, and it was a cold one. I spent most of it inside the garage, the heaters blasting, working on a delicate restoration of a classic convertible. The owner wanted every detail to be perfect, which suited me just fine. I lost myself in the work. The news about my ex-wife became less frequent, but more dire. Her landlord was apparently getting impatient about the rent for the boutique. She'd started trying to sell online spiritual coaching sessions to make ends meet. Her posts had a slightly more desperate edge to them. Less blessed, more facing challenges from the universe to test my strength. One Friday, my buddy told me the latest development. Her guru had convinced her of one final grand solution to her financial problems. He told her that her money channel was blocked by a deep-seated poverty trauma, possibly from a past life. To unblock it, she needed to make a significant offering of faith. Essentially, she had to give him a large sum of money, which he would then use to perform a powerful ritual at a sacred energy vortex in Arizona. It was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard, but she bought it, hook, line, and sinker. She cleared out a huge chunk of what was left of her settlement and gave it to him. A seed, he called it. A seed that would grow into a tree of infinite wealth. You can probably guess what happened next. A week after she gave him the money, his phone was disconnected. His social media accounts were deleted. The man-bunned guru and her seed money had vanished into thin air. This was around the 1-year anniversary of our divorce. The collapse after that was quick and brutal. Without the guru to fill her head with nonsense, reality hit her like a freight train. Her soul sisters suddenly got very busy. They were on their own journeys. They couldn't be there for her right now. You know how it is. The calls stopped. The invitations to brunch dried up. Her tribe had abandoned her. An eviction notice appeared on the door of the ethereal boutique. The reclaimed wood sign was taken down. Shortly after, another eviction notice appeared on the door of her apartment. I heard all of this secondhand. I never saw her. I never reached out. It wasn't my life anymore. My life was in the garage. By then, I had finished the convertible project. The owner was a wealthy collector, and he paid me extremely well. It was a huge boost. One evening, I was sitting at my workbench, cleaning my tools. I opened my banking app on my phone. I looked at the balance in my business account. For the first time in a year, it was a respectable number. Not what it was before, but it was solid. I did some quick math. I had enough to finally buy the Mustang. The next day, I called the guy. He still had it. We made a deal. A week later, a flatbed truck pulled up to my garage. On the back was a dusty, slightly rusted but beautiful 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback. It was even better than I remembered. The lines, the shape, it was perfect. We pushed it off the truck and into my garage. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. I ran my hand over the fender, feeling the cool, solid metal under my palm. This was real. This was the result of a year of long days and lonely nights. No affirmations, no crystals, no manifesting, just work. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. For the next few weeks, that Mustang was my entire world. I spent every waking moment either working on client cars to pay the bills or working on my own project. I started by stripping it down, cataloging every part, figuring out what was salvageable and what I needed to replace. It was a massive undertaking, but I loved every second of it. It felt like I was not just rebuilding a car, but rebuilding a part of myself that I thought I had lost. The garage was my sanctuary. The noise of the tools, the smell of the grease. It was all part of the process. My life had found its new, quiet, and satisfying rhythm. I had my work, my friend, and my project. It was enough. It was more than enough. I honestly believed I would never have to hear from my ex-wife ever again. I thought that chapter of my life was finally, completely closed. Of course, I was wrong. A couple more months went by. Spring was turning into summer again. It was late, probably around 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I was in the garage, where I usually was. The main bay lights were off, and the only illumination came from a single bright work light I had hanging over the Mustang's engine bay. I had the engine block on a stand, and I was meticulously cleaning the pistons. It's a slow, methodical process. Demands all your focus. My phone, which was sitting on the workbench, buzzed. I ignored it. Probably just a spam text or an email. It buzzed again. And then a third time. With a sigh, I wiped the grease from my hands onto a rag and picked up the phone. My heart did a weird little stutter step in my chest. It was a series of messages from a number I hadn't seen in over a year, from her. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to just delete it, block the number, and go back to my pistons. But curiosity, that old dumb human instinct, won out. I opened the messages. It was a wall of text, a rambling, disjointed monologue typed out over 3 separate messages. She started by saying she hoped I was well. The standard, empty pleasantry. Then it quickly devolved into a long-winded tale of woe. She told me how the universe had been testing her, how her business was a karmic lesson and not a failure, how her guru was a false prophet sent to teach her about trusting her own intuition, how her friends had been energy vampires who were drawn to her light but couldn't handle its intensity. It was the same old script, the same spiritual jargon she had used to justify everything. She never once took responsibility for a single one of her bad decisions. It was always some external, cosmic force acting upon her. Then, the message shifted. It got to the point. She talked about being in a transitional phase in her life, a chrysalis moment, she called it. She'd lost her apartment, she admitted. She was staying on a friend's couch, but that was a temporary energy that wasn't serving her. She had a new business idea, she said, something more aligned with her true soul's purpose. But to launch it, to get back on her feet, she needed seed capital. That's when I saw the number, $5,000. The message was carefully worded. It wasn't a loan in her eyes. It was an energetic investment. She wasn't just asking for money. She was offering me an opportunity to align my own karma by helping a soul in need. She promised that once her new venture took off, the universe would repay me tenfold. She ended the last message with a line that made my stomach turn. I know you have it. You've always been good with money. You've always been so grounded. The very same quality she had dragged me through a court of law for, calling it toxic and suffocating, was now being presented as a virtue she could benefit from. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I put the phone down on the workbench, the screen still lit up with her words. I looked around my garage. My eyes landed on the Mustang's chassis, sitting there solid and real under the work light. I looked at the engine block on the stand, a complex and beautiful piece of machinery. I looked at the rows of tools hanging neatly on the wall, each one bought with money I had earned through skill and effort. I looked at my hands, stained with grease and covered in small nicks and calluses. Everything in this space was real. It was the result of cause and effect, of action and consequence. There was no magic, no manifestation, no cosmic energy, just physics, chemistry, and hard work. And then I thought about that $5,000. I knew exactly what that amount of money meant in real-world terms. It was a new set of high-performance tires. It was the cost of getting the body professionally sanded and primed for paint. It was a significant chunk of the upholstery work for the interior. It was hundreds of hours of my life, spent under cars, wrestling with rusted bolts and faulty wiring, and she was asking for it so she could relaunch her energy. I didn't feel angry. I was surprised by that. A year ago, a message like this would have sent me into a rage. But now I just felt nothing. A profound sense of detachment. It was like reading a request from a complete stranger, a particularly delusional one. Her problems were of her own making, built from a fantasy world she refused to leave. My world was built of steel and oil and tangible results. The two were no longer connected. I picked up my phone again. I thought about all the things I could say. I could have torn her arguments apart, point by point. I could have reminded her of the things she said in court. I could have listed all the foolish ways she had burned through a sum of money that would have been life-changing for most people. I could have been cruel. I could have been sarcastic. But what was the point? It wouldn't change anything. It would just be feeding into the drama. A simple, clean break was better. My fingers moved across the keyboard. I typed out a short reply. No emotion, no sarcasm, just a statement of fact. Ava, all my material and energetic flows are currently invested in real projects. I recommend you try manifesting the money. Good luck. I hit send. The message delivered instantly. Then, without waiting for a reply, I held my finger down on her contact name. The options came up. Share contact, add to favorites, block this caller. I pressed block this caller. A confirmation popped up. Are you sure? I was sure. I pressed block contact. Her name and message thread vanished from my phone. It was done. I placed the phone back on the workbench, screen down. The click of the plastic case hitting the wood surface sounded loud in the quiet garage. A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was relief. A finality. The last loose thread from my old life had just been snipped. I stood there for a second, just breathing in the familiar air of my workspace. Then I picked up the clean rag and the piston I had been working on. I turned my attention back to the task at hand, my mind clearing. The tiny grooves in the metal, the precise fit of the rings, the smooth action of the movement. This was my world, and it was quiet, it was orderly, and it was mine. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. The sun was streaming through the window of my small apartment. I made coffee and stood on the small balcony, looking out over the town as it woke up. It was just another day to go downstairs and work on my dream. And nobody was going to get in the way of that, not anymore. Life since then has been good, simple but good. The Mustang is coming along. The engine is fully rebuilt and back in the chassis. I fired it up for the first time last week. The sound of that V8 roaring to life in my garage. It was better than any symphony. The body is primed and ready for paint. I've decided on the color, Highland Green. Just like in the movie. My business is doing well. Word of mouth has brought me a steady stream of interesting projects. I see my buddy Reese at the bar every Friday. We talk about cars, sports, the usual stuff. We never talk about her. There's no need to. Sometimes I wonder what happened to her. I assume she found some other couch to sleep on, some other person to try and leech energy from. Maybe she finally got a real job. Maybe she found another guru. I honestly don't know, and more importantly, I don't care. Her story is no longer my story. My story is written in torque specs and wiring diagrams. It smells like gasoline and fresh paint. It's the story of a man who got knocked down, lost a dream, and then quietly, patiently, and without any magic, built it back with his own two hands. And as I stand here in my garage, looking at that beautiful piece of American steel, I know it's a damn good story.